If you were ever a kid in a candy store, odds are you know exactly which candy to grab a handful of if you're aiming to scratch that sour itch. A moderate sour craving could be satisfied with a pack of Sour Patch Kids, or maybe a box of Lemon Heads. But for those candy thrill seekers who really wanted to pucker up, the only solution was sour Warheads. Warheads were as delicious as they were terrifying. The schoolyards that were awash with tales of gaining a gnarly hole in your tongue if you eat enough of them were the same schoolyards which dared you to eat 20 of them at a time for clout. The infamous candy had a reputation as being the most sour candy ever unleashed on humankind. But, like the weapons which bear their name, could Warheads really, actually hurt you? Or is all that talk just sour grapes? Well, today we're dropping a bombshell as we answer the question, were Warheads ever really dangerous? But before we end on a sour note, why don't you head on over to that subscribe button? Then let us know in the comments below what other mouth-watering mysteries you want to know about. For now, this means war. Sour treats are nothing new. Aside from Granny Smith apples or other naturally sour fruits, the ancient Greeks, Persians, and Egyptians had all made their own sour concoctions from the juice of lemons, pomegranates, and tamarind. But sour flavors in the candy industry didn't really become a thing until centuries later, around the early 1800s. Confectioners looking to add a bit of kick would include different chemicals to their sweets in order to boost the flavor, using ingredients such as lemon juice, cream of tartar, or vinegar, along with chemicals like malic acid, which is a natural occurrence in nature, akin to a super-concentrated dose of what makes green apples sour, could manipulate the flavors and morph something sweet into something slightly more exciting. Decades of manufacturing and taste testing later have resulted in many extreme candies, both sour and spicy. The Atomic Fireball, for instance, was introduced by Chicago's Ferrara Pan Candy Company in 1954 and was essentially a pioneer in the extreme candy business that paved the way for other extreme sour or hot tastes. This is where candy manufacturers in Taiwan got the idea for the sour warhead around 1975. In 1993, Peter DeJager, founder of the Foreign Candy Company in Hull, Iowa, was introduced to the product and brought it back to the States to try and sell it on his own. With its name as a reference to the sour flavor feeling like a warhead has gone off in your mouth, the tiny candy with a big taste was a hit with America's bravest sweet tooths. Featuring a package with a warning about consuming too many pieces and a cartoon mascot with an exploding head named Wally Warhead, the tiny, delicious booby traps could be bought for pennies and devoured very carefully. The intense and mouth-busting flavor you're tasting when a warhead touches your tongue comes primarily from microencapsulated malic acid, which is coated in palm oil for a slow, excruciating release of sour power. This sets warheads aside from other tart-tasting treats like Lemon Heads or Sour Patch Kids, which typically have a sour candy shell or are simply blasted with sour crystals on the outside. Each will blast your tongue to smithereens, but only warheads are designed to scorch the earth. By the time they were introduced stateside in the early 1990s, warheads immediately began to gain traction, becoming a national product by the late 1990s. The candy came in 5 main tongue-tarnishing flavors: blue raspberry, lemon, green apple, black cherry, and watermelon, with additional flavors like cherry lime and mango melon eventually joining the lineup. Some claim lemon is the most sour flavor, while others vehemently argue that black cherry takes the sour crown. Warheads can be bought in bulk if you'd like to be added to a federal watch list, and sold individually across convenience stores, corner shops, and anywhere kids might be likely to beg their parents for candy. This approach saw Warheads become a valued $40 million brand for the Foreign Candy Company. But the gimmick of being the most sour candy known to kids, the stuff of playground legend, was a primary factor in its skyrocketing brand recognition. The mere mention of a warhead was enough to make a 90s kid's eyes go wide with fear and excitement. The intense sourness sparked schoolyard challenges, in which children would dare each other to eat as many as possible at one time. Some of you just had a flashback. This dare factor was showcased in print, with a 1997 article about the candy dares in USA Today, as well as television, with an episode of the Food Network's Unwrapped, focusing on the lip-puckering phenomenon. With the success of the extreme sour Warheads following the legacy of dangerous candies such as Atomic Fireballs, Red Hots, Sweet Tarts, or Sour Patch Kids, many competitors and knockoffs attempted to capitalize on the crazy, with Warheads throwing in some new ideas of their own to keep up. So-called gross-out candies included Toxic Waste in 2001, marketed as hazardously sour, and came in a small cup shaped to look like a nuclear waste barrel. Barnett's introduced Mega Sour, tiny balls of coated sour crystals, which promised extreme sour bursts lasting 20 seconds. You get your money back if it only lasts for 19. Additionally, the previous record holder on the schoolyard sour scale, Crybabies, which were introduced in 1991, decided they needed to try to win back their crown, changing up their packaging and sour chews to resemble that of Warheads. The extreme candy market was booming by the turn of the 21st century, becoming a contest of intensity as each brand tried to be the Sultan of Sour. Though if you ask most people of candy binging age at the time, they would tell you Warheads always reigned supreme. Warheads also began expanding their own offerings, with new sour candies emerging to destroy mouths all across the country in the form of jelly beans, soda, energy drinks, and just about anything else you could slap a sour coating on. Thrill seekers attempting to grow their palate could now grab a variety of new Warheads Extreme Sour Juniors, Super Sour Spray, Sour Jelly, Super Sour Double Drops, Sour Chewy Cubes, Sour Dippers, and Sour Twists. Basically, if there is a new way to deliver that sour flavor, Warheads is going to try it. They even tried to spice things up for a minute. Cherry Combustion and Tangerine Torture were flavors that matched Warheads' penchant for sour, but this time with a spicy twist. While they may have burned your mouth, they didn't catch fire with enough fans, and Warheads extinguished the line. A candy with the reputation of Warheads was never going to operate without criticisms, the most notable being the damage eating too many of them can do to your mouth. So you may be surprised to learn that some die-hard Warhead fans claim that the manufacturer has been nerfing their product, quietly changing their formula away from malic acid and more toward citric, resulting in a less sour experience than those of 30 years prior. But there's not really any evidence. But likely the most persistent legend behind Warheads are claims that the candy can literally peel the skin from your tongue, or even, in some extreme cases, burn a hole right through the top layer, like a chemical skin peel. While no governing body asks them to do it, Warheads includes a warning label discouraging consumers from eating too many pieces too quickly. Generally speaking, companies don't put warning labels on their products unless they absolutely have to, because those labels can negatively affect sales. So the fact that Warheads added one voluntarily means you should probably pay attention to it. Reports have come in from all over the world about children enjoying a bit too much of the candy with painful consequences. 2 young children in Australia, a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl, allegedly suffered serious burns on their tongues after eating several Warheads. Medical experts confirm that the acids in sour candy do have the tendency to lay some serious road rash on your tongue, leading to soreness and possible damage if consumed excessively and untreated. If you're so inclined, you can watch several ill-advised YouTubers put this to the test, with predictably gruesome results. While Warheads and other extreme candies are not inherently dangerous, unless you choke on one, they can cause temporary irritation and discomfort. The flavor-giving acids contained in any bite-sized candy can lead to tooth enamel erosion, leading experts to recommend a glass of water or milk to wash it down, so it doesn't hang around on your teeth. This has led to an outright ban of some of Warheads' families of products by countries like the Philippines, where Warheads Super Sour Gelled Cherry is targeted by the FDA as an unregistered product. Some Warheads products are less reputable than others. For instance, the Warheads Sour Spray has a pH level around 1.6. pH level is a measure of how acidic something is, with a higher number indicating less acid and more basic. With sour spray's pH level being so low, it's more akin to battery acid than it is to candy. However, it likely won't melt your insides. It just may feel like it is until your saliva can balance everything out again. With low pH, high sugar, and tooth-destroying acids, Warheads are a little like weaponized candy. It's right there in the name. But that hasn't made them any less popular. In fact, a current social media trend claims that eating sour candies such as Warheads can help reduce the effects of a panic attack, but the claim lacks any scientific backing. Sure, focusing on a sour disaster happening in your mouth may distract you temporarily, but at the end of the day, you're still stressed, except now your mouth is slightly irritated. Today, Warheads are still being manufactured by Impact Confections in the US and Universal Candy in Australia. They can be found in the candy aisles of most large supermarkets and are even more readily available online, where the whole line of their mouth-puckering products are available. Sour enthusiasts looking to dismantle the taste buds in their mouths for a short while can enjoy varieties such as Extreme Sour Hard Candy, Chewy Cubes, Worms, Smash Up's Extreme Sour Hard Candy, Sour Twists, Sour Taffy, Sour Gum in multiple flavors, Dippin' Ring, and Sour Soda. The brand continues to be one of the most recognizable sour offerings in the snack food world, with new products being introduced regularly. As recently as April 2025, Warheads introduced a new lineup of Warheads Atomic Fizz candies, which boasts a fizzy explosion once you reach the center, like that movie, The Core. With the hard candy business continually raking in over $500 million every year and Warheads essentially cornering the sour candy market since the mid-90s, you could expect more offerings in the future, each more sour than the last. Because sour candy is nothing if not an arms race.
When you're looking to wash away your troubles with a single drink, one can on the convenience store shelf stands out above the rest. It's been called liquid cocaine and blackout in a can. But for the rest of us, there's only one name, or two names, or technically four, that will delete every memory in your head except for the desire to party. Today, we're getting crazy with the hardwired history of Four Loko. Okay, time to live La Vida Loco. Before Four Loko entered the scene, different cultures had already developed their own mixes of caffeine and alcohol. In Italy, they had Caffè Corretto, which is a shot of espresso and a little bit of either brandy or the grape-based pomace spirit, grappa. Either way, you're walking into work a little toasty. In Spain, and eventually Latin America as well, they had Catahiro, a cold coffee with added spices and a healthy dose of liquor. The exact type of liquor varies from country to country. Heck, you could probably put Four Loko in it. No one would stop you. And on second thought, somebody might. And of course, in Ireland, they had their hot, whiskey-loaded Irish coffee, sometimes topped with whipped cream. Still, none of these caffeine and liquor creations packed enough punch for some, and most of them acted more as a late-night pick-me-up than an all-in-one recipe for a guaranteed blackout. Plus, let's face it, no one wants to see you chug 12 Irish coffees in one sitting. You don't even want to see that. Luckily for the ne'er-do-wells of the 1990s, a whole new invention was about to make its splash on Western markets. Red Bull, a Thai energy drink first created in 1987, slowly made its way across Europe over the course of the decade. There, Red Bull marketed itself to alpine skiers, both as an energy booster, providing that extra edge for those hitting the slopes, and as a cocktail mixer, meant to keep the party going late into the night. So when Red Bull finally landed in America in 1997, it was already well established as an international mixer, like a guy with a vague accent and 500,000 Instagram friends. As you might expect, it didn't take long for American partiers to bring Red Bull to their shindigs. Before the millennium was up, reports began to emerge that Ohio State University frat brothers were mixing Red Bull with liquor to get their parties bumping. While over on America's West Coast, raves began selling Red Bull drinks in a variety of high-end cocktails. The practice quickly caught on everywhere, and vodka Red Bull soon became a bar-time staple. Wanting to capitalize on this growing trend, along came Sparks, America's first ever alcoholic energy drink, no mixing required. Introduced in 2002, this 6% ABV malt beverage had all the staples of your typical energy drink. It had ginseng, guarana, and, who could forget, taurine. Sparks grew naturally over the years that followed, and it eventually gained the attention of Miller Brewing Company, who acquired the brand in 2006. During that same time, Sparks also gained the attention of three particular Ohio State frat brothers, Chris Hunter, Jeff Wright, and Jason Freeman. Since this raucous trio had already been making energy drink cocktails of their own in their Kappa Sigma basement, they were unimpressed by what Sparks brought to the table and figured they could make a better product. So in 2005, they formed Fusion Projects LLC, and they came up with the first ever prototype for what they, at the time, dubbed Energy Beer, referring to themselves as their own target market over the entire development process. Energy beer is a legend we all cling to, like the philosopher's stone of alcohol. The initial Fusion Project's beverage contained 4 primary ingredients: guarana, taurine, caffeine, and, most distinctly, wormwood. Wormwood is an old world plant that's been naturalized in much of North America. In ancient times, it was used to treat jaundice, to help sore throats, and, most commonly, to help with all ailments concerning the female reproductive system. Because of this gynecological connection, botanists usually came to incorporate Artemis, who was the Greek goddess of childbirth, into the plant's binomial name. Wormwood thereby became scientifically known as Artemisia absinthium, the latter part of which gave the popular 1800s drink absinthe its name. Likewise, while myths surrounding absinthe's hallucinogenic effects are unfounded, they all tend to blame its unique ingredient, wormwood, for making people go, well, loco. Thus, by putting wormwood in their new product, the frat brothers were drawing a direct connection between their beverage and one of the most notorious spirits of the last century. It's a thing 3 frat brothers would do. At first, they simply called this beverage 4, named after its 4 primary ingredients. Like the sparks that inspired it, 4 had an ABV of 6%. Why not call it 6? And it came in cherry and berry flavors. No one seemed to want what Fusion Projects were selling though, and 4 ended up being pulled after just 1 year on the market. The frat brothers went back to the drawing board, and what they came up with next would forever change the college party scene. They decided to drop the wormwood from their drink entirely and to increase the alcohol content by more than double. They also, for the first time, adopted large 23.5-ounce cans, making the new version of their drink the alcoholic equivalent of about 4 to 6 beers, balanced out with the caffeine of about an entire can of Red Bull and an additional shot of espresso. Fusion Projects called their new product 4 Loko, and they sent it to store shelves in 2008. At first, this fondly nicknamed blackout in a can cost just $2.50, and it was available in 46 states. This time around, Fusion Projects found near-instant success among college kids, and a newspaper from Indiana's Ball State University lovingly bestowed upon it the tagline, "Hyper, horny, and happy," eloquently articulating the many phases one went through while drinking 4 Loko. They left out tired and confused, which are the phases that typically occur the morning after. But even in its first season on the market, storm clouds were already forming over Top 4 Loko's 23.5-ounce head. 15 different kids from 2 different colleges were reportedly hospitalized from consuming too much 4 Loko, and the great eye of the Food and Drug Administration immediately swiveled its attention to Fusion Projects. The FDA was already well aware of the dangers of mixing caffeine and alcohol. Because alcohol is a depressant and caffeine is a stimulant, caffeine is capable of making people feel less drunk than they actually are. So they'll often drink more than they otherwise would, increasing the damage done by the alcohol. Because of this, the FDA requested that Fusion Projects provide evidence demonstrating their product was safe for consumption. This seemingly simple request proved to be a near impossible task that Loko never quite managed to pull off. 4 Loko was under the Fed's microscope heading into 2009, and college kids everywhere took notice. For 2 wild years, 4 Loko's popularity surged, like the name of that other drink that had entirely too much caffeine in it. Everyone seemed to sense that 4 Loko could be gone for good any day, and like a loved one in hospice, they had to spend as much time with it as they could. In 2009, Fusion Projects made about $45 million on the product. In 2010, they made about $100 million, selling about 60 million cans in the process. Despite these financial gains, or maybe because of them, pressure continued to mount on Fusion Projects. Even Senator Chuck Schumer came to condemn their drink, stating that 4 Loko was designed to appear hip with flashy colors and funky designs that could appeal to younger consumers.
I say to parents, that's dangerous stuff, and your kids won't even know it's dangerous.
Yes, Chuck, it was the hip and funky, flashy colors that were bringing in the college kids and nothing else. Soon after, as more and more people were hospitalized from drinking too much 4 Loko, universities began banning 4 Loko from their campuses altogether. Most famously, New York Assemblyman Felix Ortiz, hell-bent on getting 4 Loko banned from his state, drank 2 full cans of the stuff in under an hour. Naturally, his blood pressure rose, and he threw it all back up shortly thereafter. New York then moved forward with their ban, joining the likes of Michigan, Oklahoma, Utah, and Washington. Although, in 4 Loko's defense, we challenge anyone to chug 2 cans of malt liquor without yakking like a super soaker full of gravy. Soon, lawsuits started flying. Some parents blamed Four Loko for their children being hospitalized, and some rare cases even dying after consuming the drink. Four Loko argued that they could not be held accountable for underage drinking, as it was illegal for those under 21 to be in possession of their product in the first place. Must have been those hip, funky colors. What's more, after one high-profile incident wherein 9 Washington State University students were hospitalized after drinking Four Loko, creator Chris Hunter put out a public statement. He said that his company's product shouldn't be held at fault, seeing as the incident's police report clearly stated, 14 separate times, that there were illegal drugs at the Washington State party. He also pointed out that many craft beers were more alcoholic than Four Loko, which is a fair point, although we wouldn't have used the word many.
It's called servings, kids. You gotta look on the side of the can.
How many servings are in a can?
120.
All right.
And further argued that Bud Light Lime's packaging was far more enticing to young drinkers than anything Four Loko had ever put out, which is harder to support. One of those two drinks looks like a Power Ranger, Chris, and it ain't the Bud Light. The FDA wasn't convinced by any of this either, and that same month, they sent a letter to Fusion Projects, as well as the makers of Moonshot, Juice, and Core High Gravity, threatening to shut all of them down in just 15 days if they didn't take steps to change their products. And thus, after 2 whole years of fighting against the system, Fusion Projects at last obliged. Fusion Projects hereby announced on November 16, 2010, that they were going to remove all of Four Loko's energy drink ingredients. Mourners soon gathered in New York's Union Square for a candlelight vigil, and some of the other alcoholic energy drink brands just gave up the fight entirely. A black market emerged on eBay and on Craigslist for the caffeinated version of Four Loko, with some cans selling for as high as $50 a pop. But a series of police raids on the homes of online retailers quickly put an end to caffeinated Four Loko for good. In January of 2011, Four Loko reemerged like McMurphy at the end of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a shell of its former self. This new Four Loko no longer contained any of the 4 ingredients the product was named after, and the guarana, taurine, and caffeine were all tossed into the dustbin of history. Even so, much to the dismay of the FTC, Fusion Projects held on to their product's Loko. They kept the 12% ABV, the one quality Four Loko still has left to separate it from the pack. The FTC naturally put out a statement. They clarified that, even without the added caffeine, Four Loko still was not necessarily safe, stating, "Consuming a single can of Four Loko on a single occasion constitutes binge drinking," which means Assemblyman Ortiz was on a serious bender when he drank 2 in a row. Shortly thereafter, Jonathan Howland, a researcher at Boston University, argued that the ban on alcoholic energy drinks seemed largely ineffective because, in their absence, college students simply resumed their old practice of combining non-alcoholic energy drinks with liquor. The fight was over, though, and there was no going back for Four Loko. The product trucked on into the 2010s, and they managed to grow their business into 35 different countries. And that's without caffeine. Imagine how big the expansion would have been if they'd had all that extra energy. The brand today has over a dozen different flavors, including watermelon, blue raz, fruit punch, electric lemonade, sour apple, and the ever-luxurious gold, which, despite its name, does not taste like coins or a watch. Four Loko is also sold in a variety of potencies, depending on local regulations. They've come up with several different product lines, which include their specially crafted Bartender series, their larger-than-life Bold series, and their lineup of hard seltzers. Their 70-proof Four Loko shots, which feature flavors such as Dragon's Breath and Green Tornado, and their always adored Four Loko pregame, which offers up the same Four Loko experience you know and love, but in a mini 6.8-ounce bottle. Perfect for nights when you want to pour one out for the original Loko, before the man took it from us.
When it's 2 a.m. and you need a taco and some curly fries, only one fast food clown has got your back. And it isn't the one you think. With a menu seemingly designed around late-night cravings and late-morning headaches, Jack in the Box has managed to hang with the big dogs at the drive-thru jungle despite some seriously tough breaks and a bona fide scandal. How did they survive being the most infamous restaurant in the country? Well, today we're finding out how Jack in the Box bounced back from tragedy. Okay, let's see if you know Jack. If we gave you 1,000 guesses at the background of the guy who founded Jack in the Box, you still might not get it right. It wasn't a clown or a toy maker, or even a person named Jack. It was the work of a former World War II-era naval intelligence officer. His name was Robert Oscar Peterson, and he was basically like Jack Ryan, if Jack Ryan fought Hitler and sold burgers. Jack Ryan in the box. Now there's a concept. In 1941, Peterson opened a classic drive-in diner, which he initially called Topsy's. He expanded quickly, eventually opening several locations under both that name and the name Oscars. One of the Oscars was located on El Cajon Boulevard in San Diego, California. And in 1951, in a moment that was presumably inspired by some divine fast food muse, Peterson converted it into the world's first Jack in the Box. Actually, he was inspired by the decor at his other restaurants. Over time, they had developed a circus theme featuring a clown character. Clowns do have a habit of showing up when your back is turned. Also, the new franchise did, in a sense, have a box, namely an intercom. In fact, while Jack in the Box wasn't the first fast food restaurant with a drive-thru, it was the first major fast food drive-thru to have a two-way intercom for ordering, which sped service considerably. Despite all the clown stuff, Jack in the Box became popular. Peterson quickly got busy converting all of his other locations into Jack in the Boxes. And within just 5 years, there were over 180 locations. There is a good chance you've seen commercials for Jack in the Box. But if you've never actually seen one of the restaurants, that might be because the franchise is mostly confined to the western and southwestern United States, with some exceptions. Taco Bell has long been dogged by rumors that they serve substandard meat intended for use in pet food. The story has been so persistent, you'd think Taco Bell was owned by a pet food company like Ralston Purina. It's not, but Jack in the Box was. From 1968 to 1985. The franchise's early success and fast-growing popularity convinced Purina to buy out Peterson, and they wound up owning all Jack in the Box locations. Purina continued to mold the franchise into a competitor for McDonald's and Burger King. And it was under their watch that Jack in the Box was able to break through into pop culture with a popular series of commercials starring child actor Rodney Allen Rippey. Rippey appeared in numerous television shows and made his uncredited big screen debut in the legendary Mel Brooks comedy Blazing Saddles, playing the child version of the hero, Sheriff Bart. But he was most famous for a Jack in the Box commercial where he tries, and fails, to stuff a Jumbo Jack burger into his mouth, prompting his catchphrase, "It's too big to eat."
Too big to eat.
The chain continued to expand, eventually opening hundreds of new locations in new territories like the Midwest and the Northeast. But while the commercials were memorable, the public wasn't necessarily buying it. Literally, there wasn't enough demand to support all the new locations in the new territories. So in 1980, shortly after opening the 1,000th Jack in the Box, the company announced it was closing 225 locations that were underperforming, most of them in the eastern U.S. Having learned its lesson, which was apparently that people in the East absolutely hate them, the company decided to just stick to its territory from then on. Today, Jack in the Box has just a handful of locations on the entire East Coast. For the record, the Jack in the Box clown, who Time magazine once characterized as one of the 10 creepiest corporate mascots in history, has a name, and it's Jack, obviously. Jack I. Box, to be extremely precise. Also, he's dead. Or at least he was. He died in 1980, and the cause of death was corporate homicide. Allow us to explain. Looking to take the franchise in a new direction, Jack in the Box had decided it was time to part with its longtime mascot. To that end, they decided to do away with him in a new commercial that also pushed a snarky new tagline. The food is better at the box.
Food is better at the box.
To further distance themselves from their kid-friendly image. The commercial depicted a sweet old lady begging Jack in the Box employees not to blow up their mascot because of how cute he is. But once she tries the new menu, she turns bloodthirsty, commanding them to waste old Jack. They oblige her, detonating him into a zillion pieces as a joyous new jingle plays.
The food is better at the box, Jack in the Box. Better at the box, Jack in the Box.
It's pretty weird. So why did they do it? Well, Jack in the Box's humbling failure on the East Coast had taught the company that they couldn't compete with McDonald's when it came to families with young children. Don't feel bad, Jack. Nobody can. They decided that instead, they would target more affluent young urban professionals, then known as yuppies. And suddenly, a clown mascot just seemed wrong for so many reasons. Actor Dan Gilvezan would wind up filling the clown's shoes. Not literally, though. He starred in a series of ads comparing Jack in the Box's new premium upscale offerings to the junk food at McDonald's, and touting their new slogan, "There's no comparison." Americans are not big on eating horse meat, or kangaroo meat for that matter, which is why there was quite a stir in the 1980s when Jack in the Box was caught accidentally serving Americans burgers that contained horse and kangaroo meat, imported by an Australian company. The Department of Agriculture eventually stepped in and sorted it all out, but that was only after Americans had consumed most of the tainted burgers. Unfortunately, that would not be the last time Jack would run afoul of tainted meat. The worst was yet to come. In January of 1993, health department officials in the state of Washington started tracking an increase in cases of hemolytic uremic syndrome, or HUS, among children in the Seattle area. Unlike serving horse and kangaroo burgers, which may have been upsetting to some people but is generally harmless, HUS is very serious. It can cause some extremely unfun things like diarrhea, blood clots, and kidney failure. So an investigation was initiated. Surprisingly, it turned out that all the victims had eaten at Jack in the Box, where they had contracted the E. coli bacteria. More cases quickly started turning up in California, Idaho, and Nevada. Over 700 got seriously sick, and 4 children died. After the dust settled, it was learned that the meat had been contaminated by animal waste. To make matters worse, Jack in the Box had been warned by officials at multiple health departments that the refusal to cook meat to the government-recommended temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit was putting people at risk. For whatever reason, the box only cooked their meat to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and the results were tragic. Meanwhile, the effects on Jack in the Box's business were catastrophic. Sales plummeted by 35%, and hundreds of employees were laid off. It is difficult to convince diners to return to a restaurant that accidentally served horse burgers and negligently caused a fatal E. coli outbreak. But Jack in the Box managed to do it in the most unexpected way possible. They brought back Jack. The mascot made his comeback in a 1994 commercial in which he gets revenge on the executives who snuffed him out by blowing them up right back. That irony is so delicious, they should put it on the menu. Overall, the Jack's Back campaign was a big success, leading to no less than 18 consecutive quarters of growth for the company and putting the scandal back in the box. After that, Jack in the Box could do no wrong. In 1997, for example, they advertised their new Spicy Crispy Chicken Sandwich with a campaign featuring a Spice Girls parody group called the Spicy Crispy Girls. Those spots were such a success that when it came time to promote their Ultimate Cheeseburger in 1999, they did so with the NSYNC-inspired boy band, the Meaty Cheesy Boys. Commercials riffing on the XFL Professional Football League, the 2000 Tom Hanks movie Castaway, and McGruff the Crime Dog, reimagined as Larry the Crime Donkey, were also big successes for the company in its irreverent new image. Today, Jack in the Box has somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,200 locations, making it one of the U.S.'s top fast food burger chains. They serve about 500 million customers a year, 90% of which still use the drive-thru. And despite being chiefly associated with burgers, their most popular item is their tacos. Speaking of which, Jack in the Box might have the longest menu of any chain restaurant, although it may lose that title to the Cheesecake Factory at WrestleMania. They still have the Jumbo Jack Ultimate Cheeseburger, as well as the Buttery Jack and the Sourdough Jack. But then there are also bacon cheeseburgers, tacos, chicken nuggets, breakfast sandwiches, salads, and even egg rolls. From time to time, they also bust out a Philly cheesesteak, a ciabatta burger, a bacon and cheese ciabatta burger, and deli-style panitos. They even have seasonal items like Oreo mint shakes, pumpkin pie shakes, and eggnog shakes. Turns out, you could fit a whole lot into that box. In recent years, they've partnered up with the Los Angeles Dodgers with a promotion that gives free Jumbo Jacks to fans in certain areas of the city whenever Dodgers pitchers record 10 strikeouts or more. They also have a similar deal in place with the San Francisco 49ers. If the team scores 2 touchdowns, the next day a Jumbo Jack is free with purchase of a large drink. So enjoy, but watch out for vengeful clowns.
Mix up the cake, it's so fast to bake. The Easy Bake Oven and Snack Center has fast baking treats for you.
With over 30 million units sold, the Easy Bake Oven is one of the most iconic American toys of the 20th century. The miniature appliances have influenced countless future cooks, chefs, and bakers by letting kids bake just about every kind of cookie, cupcake, and brownie imaginable for the past 60 years. And they're safe. Kind of. Today, we're cooking up the history of the Easy Bake Oven. All right, easy does it. Way back in 1946, brothers Albert, Philip, and Joseph Steiner created Kenner Products, named after the Cincinnati street on which their business was founded. Among their first products was the Bubble-Matic gun, a pistol that shot bubbles instead of lead. It was less effective for law enforcement, but made an ideal toy for children. The Bubble-Matic gun was so successful that the company soon launched a whole Bubble-Matic lineup, culminating in their Bubble rocket, which by 1949 had sold over 1 million units. In the 1950s, they grew their product line to include girder and panel building sets, along with the Give a Show projector, a sort of at-home movie experience, where kids could see their favorite characters come to life, one 35mm panel at a time. But what set Kenner apart from other toy makers wasn't their building sets or their projectors, or even their snoot flutes. They had become among the first brands in America to market their merchandise on television, with ads featuring a kid-friendly mascot, the Goonie Bird, and the cheeky tagline, "It's Kenner! It's fun!" The stage was set. With their mascot, their motto, and their ability to broadcast, all that stood between Kenner and mountains of cash was one runaway success. And in the early 60s, the company found just the thing. According to legend, Kenner would regularly hold meetings where any employee could pitch a new idea, because the belief was the good ideas can come from anywhere. During one of these meetings, either salesman Norman Shapiro or designer Ronald Howes, depending on who you ask, mentioned their love of New York City street vendors, particularly those who sold fresh-baked pretzels. And this mystery man, either a Ronald or a Norman, suggested they replicate the pretzel-making experience for kids at home. Apparently, Kenner saw so much potential in the idea that they expanded it to encompass all baked goods, and their team was soon hard at work, bringing the idea to life. When all was said and done, James O. Jeep Kuhn was credited as the creative engineer behind the original Easy Bake Oven, which launched in November of 1963, just in time for the holidays. Heck yeah, Jeep! Its first iteration featured two internal 100-watt incandescent light bulbs, one that cooked the food from above and another that cooked from beneath. And it was available in two distinct colors, the elegant turquoise and the more feisty yellow, for whichever type of home your child was keeping. It likewise came with some basic cooking supplies, like a miniature spatula, a rolling pin, and a bright red mixing bowl. Despite its hefty price tag, it cost parents $15.95, which is about $160 in today's money. Kenner sold over 500,000 Easy Bake Ovens in the product's first year on the market. Before long, Easy Bake Oven became a household name. In 1964, riding high off the previous year's Easy Baked success, Kenner decided to triple the production of their newfound product. Moreover, they came out with the Easy Bake Oven's first ever accessory, the Easy Pop Corn Popper attachment, which could pop an entire bowl's worth of popcorn in 4 minutes flat. That's actually not bad. And it is extra not bad considering the first countertop microwave wouldn't be introduced for another 3 years. By 1966, over 1 million Easy Bake Ovens had been sold. By 1967, that number climbed to over 2 million. That's a lot of lukewarm cookies. In 1968, Kenner hit up puppeteer Jim Henson to update the Goonie Bird's image. And this all-new version of their mascot soon showed up in Easy Bake Oven commercials.
It's Kenner! It's fun!
Goonie Bird then became so popular that he landed himself a spot on Sesame Street's first season, revamped and renamed to become Big Bird's tiny counterpart, Little Bird.
A big bird and a little bird. We're going to be friends for a long, long time.
On Sesame Street, it's all about who you know. General Mills took notice of Kenner's ongoing success and bought up the toy maker that same year. Shortly thereafter, Kenner, now functioning as a subsidiary of General Mills, introduced Betty Crocker-branded Easy Bake Mixes, giving kids the opportunity to build brand loyalty before they can even ride a bike. The pairing proved so successful that in 1969, Kenner released an entire Betty Crocker-inspired lineup of Easy Bake Ovens. While they functioned the same as the original models, these babies included an all-new avocado green color with luxurious faux wood paneling, the same model Elaine had on Seinfeld.
You know, that batter is like 30 years old.
Kenner soon found an appetite for creating new Easy Bake models, and they jumped on the opportunity to release model after model of new and improved ovens year after year. In 1970, they created the Harvest Gold Super Easy Bake Oven, which had its own storage cabinet, a functional 20-minute timer, and pans that were double the size of its predecessor. A kid could open a food truck with one of these. Then, in 1971, they released the contemporary Easy Bake Oven, which gave the toy a floral redesign and was powered by a single 60-watt bulb instead of two 100-watt bulbs. 1971 also saw the release of the 3-minute Cake Baker, which was a simplified version of the toy, meant for younger children than their main line of products. It's never too soon to learn how to cake. 2 years later, they then tried to reach that younger demographic again with the Warm Bake Oven, a light bulb-free alternative to the Easy Bake that replaced electricity with parental labor. You had to fill the Warm Bake's reservoir with hot water in order to cook anything. And who doesn't love tiny cakes baked in water-heated plastic? Kenner continued to regularly update its hit product over the next few decades, with innovations like the Mini Wave Oven and the Dual Temp Oven, selling over 11 million units by the 1980s. In 1985, General Mills would spin Kenner off with Parker Brothers to become the independent Kenner-Parker Toys. Kenner-Parker Toys only lasted 2 years on its own, though, before being bought up by Tonka in 1987, and then bought again by its present-day owner, Hasbro, in 1991. Under Hasbro's ownership, the Easy Bake Oven got a complete overhaul, turning it into the Easy Bake Oven and Snack Center. This new iteration looked more like a microwave than a traditional range oven, and it became the dominant version of the toy for the decade that followed. By 1998, Hasbro had partnered up with just about every major food brand in America. Gone were the days of Betty Crocker's exclusivity. There were suddenly Easy Bake mixes that featured Oreos, McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, M&M's, Pop-Tarts, and Kellogg's. It was at this same time that Hasbro held the first ever Easy Bake Oven Baker of the Year contest at the 95th American International Toy Fair. That first year, Little Rock, Arkansas's Lindsay Thompson took home the Baker of the Year title, landing her a $5,000 savings bond for her outstanding toffee trifle cake recipe. The Easy Bake brand continued on trucking into the new millennium, selling just shy of 20 million units by the year 2000, and landing itself its very own Mad TV sketch.
Isn't there a child's toy oven that doesn't utilize dangerous light bulbs as its method of confection?
Tragically, Hasbro absorbed many of Kenner's products into its existing lineup of toys around that time and killed off the Kenner brand for good. May Kenner and its seemingly endless lineup of Star Wars classics rest in peace. In 2002, in an attempt to compete with Toy Max's Creepy Crawlers and to lure some boys into the Easy Bake customer base, Hasbro released the one and only Queasy Bake Cookerator. The Queasy Bake wasn't for any girly desserts. Instead, kids could whip themselves up some delicious dirt for the ever-alluring chocolate crud cake. Hasbro then also came out with the accompanying Queasy Bake Mixerator, providing some drink options for the refined Queasy Bake palate. In 2003, Hasbro introduced the Easy Bake Real Meal Oven, their first ever oven to stray away from desserts and to instead advertise itself as an all-in-one 3-course meal maker, featuring recipes from the likes of Mark Bittman, Rick Bayless, and Bobby Flay. Kids love a Bobby Flay endorsement. Just 3 years later, the Easy Bake Oven was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame, cementing its place alongside such American classics as the Metal Slinky, the Rocking Horse, and the Jump Rope. For a time, the Easy Bake Oven seemed on top of the world, but unbeknownst to Hasbro, trouble was brewing with their 2006 Easy Bake Classic Oven, the first of the Easy Bake lineup to forego light bulbs altogether and instead use a more contemporary heating element. Apparently, kids were getting their fingers stuck in its front-loading door.
I was so scared.
What's more, there were 16 separate reports of children receiving second and third-degree burns from the classic oven, culminating in a 5-year-old child having a portion of their finger amputated. So, in early 2007, Hasbro recalled all 985,000 Easy Bake Classic ovens. offering customers both a full refund for the product and a $32 voucher to put towards another Hasbro purchase. In 2008, Hasbro then brought back what was essentially an older model of the Easy Bake Oven, once more returning to the old light bulb design. It was a temporary fix, though, as there was another obstacle on the horizon. The Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 dictated that all light bulbs in America had to become more energy efficient by 2012. This meant that the hot bulbs the Easy Bake Oven had historically relied upon would no longer be available. They'd have to cook up an all-new oven fast if they wanted to stay in the game.
New Easy Bake. New Easy Bake. Yeah, it's the ultimate. All new, can't believe my eyes.
In 2011, Hasbro once again ditched the light bulb design and replaced it with heating elements, releasing the Easy Bake Ultimate Oven, which remains the primary Easy Bake model to this day. This new model initially only came out in purple and pink. But after 13-year-old McKenna Pope began an online petition asking for Hasbro to release gender-neutral colors of the toy,
that was my little brother, my favorite chef in the world. Sign this petition and join me in my fight to create gender equality.
And that petition accumulated 45,000 signatures, including those of prominent chefs like Jeff Mahan and Manuel Trevino. The first ever black and silver Easy Bake Oven was served. By 2013, as the Easy Bake Oven celebrated its 50th anniversary, Hasbro announced that over 30 million Easy Bake Ovens had been sold over the brand's lifespan, along with over 150 million mix refills. That's a lot of tea parties with the Cabbage Patch Kids. In 2017, the National Easy Bake Oven Day was founded by toy historian Todd Coopy, giving Easy Bake enthusiasts time to celebrate their favorite toy every November 4th. More recently, Hasbro collaborated with Netflix to make Easy Bake Battle, a show hosted by Queer Eyes and Tony Podolsky, wherein contestants compete to make delicious dishes for cash prizes. The show features a lineup of souped-up Easy Bake Ovens and encourages its participants to make easy, fast meals. Today, the contemporary Easy Bake Ultimate Oven goes for about $40, depending on where you shop and whether you can outrun the loss prevention specialist. The current lineup of refill mixes include Bake Shop Sprinkle Donuts, Red Velvet and Strawberry Cakes, Cheese Pizza, and, most importantly, Party Pretzel Dippers. Finally bringing New York City street vendor food directly to kids at home, just like Ron wanted. Or was it Norm?
We stopped off and bought this cafe latte.
You take a sip?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you took a sip, did you notice it was hot? Were you able to sip it in your normal fashion?
No, I wasn't able to sip it in my normal fashion.
You get me one coffee drinker on that jury, you gonna walk out of there a rich man.
Over the years, the infamous McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit has become associated with a supposed epidemic of frivolous lawsuits in the United States.
Now she claims she broke her nose on the sneeze guard at the Sizzler bending over looking at the chickpeas.
But most of what you've probably heard about that epidemic and the case itself isn't true, and is only a fraction of the piping hot coffee there is to spill. So today, we're going to take a look at the notorious McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit of the 1990s. Okay, proceed with caution because the beverage you're about to enjoy may be hot. On February 27, 1992, 79-year-old Stella Mae Liebeck ordered a coffee at the drive-thru window of a McDonald's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, like so many of us have done, although not necessarily in New Mexico. The car had no cup holders. Oh, must have been an Accord, so Liebeck held the coffee between her legs while she tried to add cream and sugar to it. Unfortunately, when she tried to remove the lid, she spilled the coffee all over her lap. Who among us has never done that dance? However, Liebeck added a new step when she sued McDonald's and offered to settle the case for $20,000. Without any context, that might sound a little ridiculous. Really? 20 G's for spilling a cup of coffee on yourself? What do you charge for dropping your fries? To many at the time, it sounded like a frivolous attempt to score some dough. And that certainly seemed to be how McDonald's felt. Rather than cut Liebeck a check for $20,000, they instead offered her a one-time payment of $800. Now, you might be wondering, if the case was so ridiculous, why did McDonald's pay her anything? Well, what do you expect from a company run by a clown? At least, we assume Ronald is in charge. You'll have to pry that company from his cold, dead gloves. So the reason McDonald's made Liebeck a counteroffer is because the case was a lot more serious than it seemed, but as you're about to hear, $800 wasn't going to cut it. You see, when Liebeck spilled that coffee on her lap, she was wearing highly absorbent sweatpants, which soaked up the hot liquid and spread it all over her thighs, buttocks, and, major ouch, her groin. She incurred third-degree burns over 6% of her body, and it sent her into a state of medical shock. She was quickly taken to a hospital where she would undergo a painful 8-day course of skin graft treatments. But despite this care, she was permanently scarred and even partially disabled for years after the incident.
I was burned so severely that they didn't think I would live.
In other words, she was not loving it. Okay, you probably heard those details and wondered what the hell McDonald's puts in their coffee. The truth is, no normal cup of coffee could have possibly caused the level of injuries Stella Liebeck sustained. After all, the average person spills coffee on themselves pretty regularly, and it almost never requires hospitalization, except for that time we knocked over Gary's espresso machine. Well, in the course of the subsequent lawsuit, Liebeck's attorneys discovered that McDonald's coffee was kept between 180 and 190 degrees Fahrenheit as a matter of company policy. That was significantly higher than the coffee temperatures of many McDonald's competitors, and for reference, is just 20 or so degrees south of boiling. Tests even showed that when kept this hot, coffee could cause third-degree burns in just 3 to 7 seconds. Hey, it'll wake you up on your morning drive. McDonald's claimed that their customers preferred coffee to be extremely hot when purchased at a drive-thru because they didn't intend to drink it until they reached their destination. But Liebeck's lawyers found that McDonald's own research actually showed customers typically intended to drink their coffee immediately while driving. You know, like every single person you've ever seen at a drive-thru. So McDonald's wasn't exactly killing it in the credibility department. Speaking of driving,
Joneses, look out!
despite the strong evidence that McDonald's was at fault, or at the very least being reckless and shady like the bad guys in Good Burger, the public tended to see the lawsuit as frivolous. And part of the reason for that was the perception that Liebeck had caused her own injuries by driving while drinking coffee. But this was not the case. Liebeck was actually a passenger in the car, which was being driven by her grandson when the injury occurred. What's more, the car wasn't even moving. Her grandson had parked so she could add cream and sugar before she accidentally spilled the coffee. It's unclear whether she managed to add enough cream and sugar to actually make it taste like anything. McDonald's wasn't looking so great to begin with, but the trial got significantly worse for them after one of their own quality assurance managers testified in court. The employee confirmed that the company required coffee to be kept around 185 degrees Fahrenheit, and that any food kept above 140 degrees Fahrenheit creates a potential burn hazard. You're getting into Hot Pockets territory there. McDonald's own employees weren't the only ones causing them headaches. 2 expert witnesses also struck major blows against McDonald's during the case, those being the chairman of the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Texas and a leading burn expert and the editor-in-chief of the scholarly publication Journal of Burn Care and Rehabilitation. Both confirmed the heat of McDonald's coffee was downright dangerous for consumers. We imagine it was somewhere around this point they began to wish they had just paid Liebeck the $20,000. During the trial, some other disturbing facts came out regarding McDonald's coffee. For example, it was revealed that from 1982 to 1992, McDonald's received over 700 complaints about their coffee's temperature. And it wasn't just a case of 700 people saying they thought the coffee was too hot. These complaints were all related to intense burns, often burns similar to the ones Liebeck sustained. You think you've heard the worst of it, but like an extra value meal, there's more grease in this bag. As it turns out, it wasn't just grown men and women getting burned by Mickey D's piping hot Java. There had even been numerous cases of children receiving coffee burns as well. Even worse, those burns were often due to McDonald's employees accidentally spilling the coffee themselves while serving guests. It's not really something they wanted to advertise, and in their defense, "It's a good time for the great taste of McDonald's" is a much better slogan than "We'll scald your face like a gangster in a Batman movie." It became pretty apparent that Liebeck's case was not an isolated incident. McDonald's had been well aware of the problem for quite some time, but had taken no measures to correct it. Come on guys, at least toss some ice cubes in the pot. The bottom line was that the testimony proved McDonald's knew the coffee was way too hot. The employee went a step further and said that McDonald's coffee, when initially poured, was not safe for human consumption as it would burn the mouth and throat. Since the coffee was intended to be consumed by humans, that was bad. So you're probably wondering what McDonald's defense could have possibly been beyond just saying, "Whoops, our bad, here's a bunch of money for your pain." Well, Mickey D's tried to defend itself by claiming customers were technically warned about the coffee's extremely hot temperatures by a statement on the side of the cup. However, as was quickly pointed out, the placement of the statement on the side of the cup where it was likely to be missed, was a questionable choice. After all, how many people read the sides of their coffee cup while they drive around? I mean, unless traffic is really boring that day. Obviously, it would make more sense to put the warning on the top of the cup where customers would look just before taking a sip. But that's not what McDonald's did. Geez, does it cost more to put it on the lid, or are they just committed to the bit? The jury reached a verdict in Liebeck's favor and awarded her an astronomical $2.7 million in punitive damages. But that amount of the punitive damages, they declared, was quickly reduced by the judge to a far more down-to-earth sounding $480,000. It's tempting to assume the judge was in the pocket of big business or something like that, but this was no indication the judge was siding with McDonald's. In fact, he soundly condemned McDonald's, calling the corporation reckless, callous, and willful. You forgot delicious.
Do you wish to confess?
Yes, Father. I'm guilty.
Eventually, after pretty much everyone already knew and it was clear they were caught, witnesses from the McDonald's Corporation admitted they had known the risks surrounding the coffee's temperature for over 10 years and that consumers were not adequately informed. When asked why the public was not made aware of the dangers of their coffee, McDonald's representatives never really offered a satisfactory explanation. They also claimed to have had no plans to reduce the temperature of their coffee in the future. So basically, they were saying they had no idea why they let it happen, but they were happy to let it happen again. Thanks, Ronald. Despite the perception that she was in it for the money, Stella Liebeck wasn't looking to drag McDonald's through the dirt or trying to get her moment in the spotlight. The truth is, she never wanted the national attention and never even wanted to go to court at all.
I was not in it for the money. I was in it because I wanted to bring the temperature down.
Additionally, Liebeck never once blamed the spill itself on McDonald's. She took full responsibility for handling the coffee poorly. However, she believed the coffee was dangerously hot because it absolutely was. And she argued that had the coffee been kept at a reasonable temperature, instead of hot enough to sterilize surgical equipment, the spill would have been a minor inconvenience instead of an incident that caused severe burns. And the science agreed with her. Studies showed that when coffee is served at 160 rather than 180 or 90 degrees, it takes 20 seconds to produce a burn, almost 3 times as long. That time could be used to get the hot liquid away from the skin, either by grabbing some towels or just removing your pants if the situation permits it. In other words, if Liebeck's coffee was served at 160 degrees, McDonald's would probably have never heard of her. People often assume that Liebeck won a massive payday. And to be fair, McDonald's did ultimately end up offering a settlement that was a whole lot more than $800, or even the $20,000 that she originally sought. Since Liebeck was concerned about the award being overturned during the appeals process, she accepted the offer. The precise details of the settlement have never been fully revealed to the public, but it's believed she received less than $600,000. In 2011, former lawyer Susan Saladoff released a documentary about the case called Hot Coffee. The film debuted at Sundance and later aired on HBO. Critics lauded the work, and The Hollywood Reporter called it a scalding documentary on tort reform that should stir up your blood pressure faster than a triple espresso. Finally, someone burned McDonald's. As of this writing, McDonald's policy is to serve its coffee between 174 and 194 degrees. But that's not out of line with the norm these days. Starbucks, for example, serves its coffee between 175 and 185 degrees, which is pretty toasty. McDonald's has at least added a stronger warning to their coffee cups. You know, assuming you can actually read it.
In December of 2005, the world had a heart attack. A heart attack grill, that is. Known for a quadruple stack of unhealthy food, sensational marketing, and controversies upon controversies, the Heart Attack Grill may be one of the most infamous eateries ever opened. But how did we get here? Who's behind this? And was the restaurant always a recipe for disaster? Well, today we'll be taking a giant bite out of the Heart Attack Grill, the restaurant that wants you to die while eating there. All right, foodies, let's hope one of you is trained in CPR. Self-proclaimed Dr. John Basso was a Jenny Craig franchisee who dedicated his professional life to helping people live healthier lifestyles through diet and exercise. However, Basso quickly became disillusioned with the fitness industry as he increasingly felt like he was selling impossible standards. The tipping point came when Basso received a letter informing him that a fast food burger chain was suing him over the name of his gyms, In-N-Out Workout Studios. And everyone watching this in California just said,
yeah, brah. Duh. Also, their fries are trash.
After a short legal battle, Basso decided to shutter his gyms for good and move in a distinctly more delicious direction. As the soon-to-be restaurateur put it, instead of being a slimy, crooked, dishonest peddler of health and fitness services, I would actually launch a hamburger concept that would be absolutely honest. Thus, Heart Attack Grill was born in December of 2005. While its original Tempe, Arizona location was a humble affair with only 6 seats, the restaurant got supersized in 2011 when Basso moved his business to the land of excess. Vegas, baby. The food at Basso's restaurant is not for the faint of heart. After being inspired by stories of his past clients cheating on their diets, his goal was to create an eating establishment so offensively unhealthy that only the most adventurous of foodies would even dare step inside. And he certainly succeeded. So for those of us who aren't brave enough to risk catastrophic heart failure, what does a typical experience at Heart Attack Grill look like? Well, the first thing to know is that Heart Attack Grill is themed like a hospital. Rather than being called a customer, all patrons are referred to as patients, and anyone over 350 pounds can eat for free, provided they get on an electronic cattle scale in front of the entire restaurant. You'll also have to adhere to a strict dress code, which consists of wearing a hospital gown over your clothes. If you feel like splurging, you can always pick up a carton of no-filter cigarettes and a candy pack for your children on the way to your table. Once seated, a waitress dressed in a skimpy nurse's outfit will fill your prescription rather than take your order, which is where the fun really begins. Heart Attack Grill boasts a decadent menu of artery-clogging meals that are specifically designed to be hazardous to your health. This includes a selection of beer, Mexican Coca-Cola, milkshakes made from butterfat cream with a side of real butter, French fries that have been deep-fried in pure lard, a half-pound chili dog, and the main event, the Bypass Burger. While bypass burgers can be prescribed as a standard single patty, the true star of the show is the octuple bypass burger. This 8-patty monstrosity contains 4 pounds of meat, 40 pieces of bacon, chili, and cheese. In case you're wondering, that adds up to about 19,900 calories. To put that into perspective, a McDonald's Big Mac has around 590 calories. So you'd have to eat 34 of them to get the bypass burger experience at your local Mickey D's. But can we get it with a side of butter? Those who fail to finish their meals at Heart Attack Grill are subject to, no joke, spankings, delivered with a paddle, courtesy of the so-called nursing staff. But if you are somehow able to clean your plate, you'll be treated to a free wheelchair ride out to your vehicle, where you will presumably sit in silence and think about all the decisions that led up to this moment. The octuple bypass burger will set an enterprising eater back about $24 and an unknown amount of years off their overall lifespan. In 2010, before Heart Attack Grill moved to Las Vegas, a man named Blair River assumed the role of the restaurant's spokesperson in a series of commercials. River quickly became a local celebrity, earning the nickname Gentle Giant, at 6 feet 8 inches tall and 575 pounds. Less than a year after becoming the face of Heart Attack Grill, River suffered a bout of pneumonia and passed away at just 29 years old. In an unfortunate case of history repeating itself, another unofficial Heart Attack Grill spokesperson would have their life cut short a few years later. John Allman had been a staunch supporter of Heart Attack Grill since its inception and reportedly visited the restaurant every day. He was such a dedicated presence that his likeness graced the menus and merchandise at the Las Vegas location. But in 2013, while waiting for the bus after his daily dose of bypass burger, Allman had a heart attack and collapsed. These are not the only cases of medical emergencies associated with the dubious restaurant, though thankfully none of the other instances have been fatal. In 2012, within 60 days, 2 separate people were hospitalized for medical issues that occurred mid-meal at Heart Attack Grill. The first incident occurred on February 11th, when a man suffered a heart attack while eating a triple bypass burger. This was originally thought to be a stunt planned by the restaurant, so other patrons were reportedly taking pictures and recording videos until emergency services arrived. The second incident, on April 21st, saw a woman fall unconscious while drinking, smoking, and eating a double bypass burger. In fairness, she was really going for the gold. Basso is fully aware of the possible consequences of eating at his restaurant and isn't shy about flaunting the results. After the death of John Allman, Basso was interviewed by Bloomberg TV and took full advantage of the tragedy that had occurred right outside his establishment. During the sensationalized segment, the restaurateur brought out a plastic bag filled with what he claimed to be the ashes of his deceased patron. Those supposed ashes remain above the bar in Heart Attack Grill to this day. During that same interview, Basso went so far as to say, "I'm probably the only restaurateur in the entire world who is unapologetically telling you that my food is bad for you, that it will kill you, and you should stay away from it." You can't get much clearer than that. After all, the restaurant's official slogan is, "A burger to die for." Allman's death prompted Washington, D.C.-based organization Officials for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine to pen a letter to Basso, asking him to declare moral bankruptcy and shut down Heart Attack Grill. Of course, Basso didn't take this recommendation to heart. He's been running Heart Attack Grill for almost 2 decades and has been collecting new controversies every step of the way. As early as 2006, Basso found himself in legal trouble for using the word nurse at his restaurant and website. According to an Arizona statute, only someone with a valid nursing license can legally use the title, which Basso did not have, despite calling himself a doctor. This prompted Basso to stir up online support for his use of free speech, and ultimately culminated in the restaurateur threatening healthcare providers with a fire hose, for which he was promptly arrested. It is not clear what the specific charge was, but it is believed to be along the lines of acting like a cartoon character. Not even jail would dissuade Basso, though. He refused to stop using the word and instead added an asterisk beside it, providing a disclaimer that none of the women working at Heart Attack Grill could actually provide medical services. However, they can provide a paddling. Then, in 2011, when Basso first moved his headline-grabbing restaurant to Vegas, he also aimed to open a branch in Dallas, Texas. That attempt was swiftly thwarted, as residents protested the restaurant relentlessly, and management fell behind on rent payments. It was forced to close only after a few months of operation, and hasn't reopened since. More recently, Basso was caught up in a scandal involving a former employee and a sexual harassment lawsuit, which was settled out of court in 2020. Basso has been accused of sending an employee inappropriate texts, emails, and images, and allegedly showed up at the woman's house and described himself as a jealous psychopath, before threatening legal action if the employee spoke out about her treatment. Sounds like someone needs to wheel him out to his vehicle. But the omnipresent controversy surrounding Basso and Heart Attack Grill will always be the restaurant itself. Medical professionals and average people alike have criticized Basso's flagrantly unhealthy restaurant for being amoral, irresponsible, and just plain gross. Whatever you may personally think of Basso and his bypass burgers, it can't be denied that Heart Attack Grill promotes unrealistic and unrecommended eating habits. It should be avoided at all costs if you value your heart and your health. And Basso is happy to tell you as much himself. And yet, after years of reveling in bad press, personal scandals, and making a spectacle of the demise of loyal customers, business is still going strong. Clearly, controversy is a winning strategy when it comes to marketing a restaurant like Heart Attack Grill. So, the only question left to ask is, are you ordering the single, quadruple, or octuple bypass burger? And do you want a butterfat shake with that?
Where you going, General?
Following in the footsteps of other great military leaders like General Tso and Colonel Sanders, Cap'n Crunch made himself a fortune in the food business. But despite the brand's storied history and dedicated fan base, even the captain's biggest supporters are willing to admit that his cereal is murder on the roof of your mouth.
That's blood!
So why are we all okay with it? Well, today we're going to take a look at how Cap'n Crunch gets away with destroying your mouth. Okay, it's crunch time.
The crunch always gives you away.
Okay, cards on the table. There is no Captain Crunch. Hopefully no young children are watching this. He's just a fictional advertising mascot drummed up by the Quaker Oats Company to sell cereal to kids. Quaker, as we know it, was technically founded in 1901, but the name actually goes back to 1877, when the Quaker Mill Company was founded by an Ohio man named Henry Parsons Crowell. In 1891, Crowell partnered up with millers Robert Stewart and Ferdinand Schumacher to form the American Cereal Company. But after some corporate infighting, they kicked Schumacher out and changed the name of the operation to the Quaker Oats Company. The company was already producing oat and wheat cereals by this point, but Cap'n Crunch wouldn't come around till 1963. The Cap'n story actually starts in 1960, when Quaker gave kids a survey asking about their favorite snacks and learned that kids under 10 vastly preferred crunchy foods. The company set out to cash in by creating the ultimate crunchy breakfast cereal. The cereal itself was designed by a team led by Quaker executive Bob Reinhart, who would also later contribute to the creation of Life cereal. Made from a sweetened combination of corn and oats, pieces of Cap'n Crunch were yellow in color and shaped something like rectangular pillows. The cereal was also one of the first to deliver its flavor through an oil coating. That unique flavor was created by a professional flavorist named Pamela Lowe. According to her, the taste of Cap'n Crunch was intended to mimic a particular mixture of brown sugar and butter her grandmother used to serve her over rice. Lowe, who eventually came to be known as the mother of Cap'n Crunch, believed the flavor gave cereal a quality she referred to as want moreishness. And considering people have wanted more for the last 63 years, it's hard to argue with her. Of course, Quaker understood that the look and taste of the cereal wasn't nearly as important as how it would be marketed, so they hired a marketing firm to design them a mascot. It was such a big deal, the company spent 80% of its budget just developing the mascot. But what they got was worth every penny. When it comes to breakfast cereal mascots, Quaker was a trailblazer. In fact, as far as anyone could tell, Quaker's own mascot, that old guy in the flat, wide-awake hat, is the first breakfast cereal mascot ever. He was trademarked in 1877 and first appeared on a cereal box the following year. And while 150-year-old portraits of Quakers always make fantastic mascots, the 20th century saw breakfast cereals increasingly using animated characters as mascots instead. Rice Krispies, for example, introduced pitchmen Snap, Crackle, and Pop way back in 1933, and Tony the Tiger started hawking Frosted Flakes in 1952. We did a whole episode about him. To create the mascot for their new cereal, Quaker turned to veteran television writer Alan Burns, who is the co-creator of hit sitcoms The Munsters and The Mary Tyler Moore Show. But by the time Captain Horatio Magellan Crunch sailed onto the scene in 1963,
All hands on deck!
breakfast cereal mascots were already kinda tired. However, Saturday morning cartoons were brand new and hugely popular with children. One of the most popular was Rocky and Bullwinkle, created by Jay Ward. Looking to make sure their mascot would resonate with children as strongly as those characters, Quaker went right to the source and asked Ward himself to produce the commercials for their new cereal. Ward agreed, and he made the commercials in the same style as Rocky and Bullwinkle. And thanks to Ward, Cap'n Crunch wasn't just a mascot. He was a fully realized cartoon character with a backstory and a nemesis and everything. Crunch, whose ship is called the Guppy, was born on Crunch Island, which is a magical island located in the Sea of Milk. His first mate is a dog named Sea Dog. His crew are 4 kids named Alfie, Dave, Brunhilde, and Carlisle. And his archenemy is Jean Lafoot, a pirate character who was so popular in the 1970s, he got his own cereal called Jean Lafoot Cinnamon Crunch. It kind of sounds like the cereal tastes like feet. Cinnamon feet. The continuing adventures of Crunch and his supporting cast unfolded in the series of commercials, as well as comic strips printed right on the cereal box, which always contained a toy. Kids were defenseless against it. Cap'n Crunch was successful right from its launch, and soon enough, Quaker went looking to expand the line. The first variant was called Cap'n Crunch's Crunch Berries, and it hit supermarket shelves as early as 1967. It was the same yellow rectangles you found in regular Cap'n Crunch, but mixed in with round red berry flavored pieces. Quaker was so into Crunch Berry cereal, they even gave it its own mascot, the Crunch Berry Beast. Also created by Jay Ward, the Beast is a weird anthropomorphic spotted yellow creature with a shock of red hair who lives on Crunchberry Island and is occasionally depicted riding a unicycle. These days, the Crunchberries themselves come in red, green, purple, and blue, but don't get too excited, they all taste the same. The Crunchberry spinoff was apparently popular enough for Quaker to try their luck on Peanut Butter Crunch, which dropped in 1969. Peanut Butter Crunch ditched the yellow pieces and replaced them with peanut butter flavored corn puffs, and like its 2 predecessors, it got its own Jay Ward designed mascot, Smedley the Elephant. Following its debut, Peanut Butter Crunch quickly became the most popular cereal of the line for a time. The early 70s saw the introductions of 3 new members of the Crunch family, Punch Crunch, Vanilla Crunch, and the aforementioned Jean Lafoot Cinnamon Crunch, but these were all eventually lost at sea. In the years since, there have been way too many variations to name here. but some of the more memorable ones include Deep Sea Crunch, Galactic Crunch, Home Run Crunch, Neutron Berries, Mystery Volcano Crunch, Polar Crunch, and most recently, Sea Berry Crunch. If you've ever eaten Cap'n Crunch, then you've probably noticed that it's a bit like putting a tiny Wolverine in your mouth. The Marvel Comics character, not the animal. The problem is so pervasive that in 1999, the famous satirical newspaper The Onion ran a story titled "Roof of Mouth in Serious Condition Following Cap'n Crunch Consumption." In the following year, the hit animated comedy Family Guy depicted the Cap'n putting a hit on Count Chocula for spreading mouth shredding about his cereal. But we've all felt the sting of a sip of orange juice on our freshly crunched gums. And although it is among the worst offenders, it's not just his flagship cereal that does it. Every variation of Cap'n Crunch has a similar reputation, to some extent of another, from Crunch Berries to Peanut Butter Crunch to Canuck Crunch, a recent variation only available in Canada. So the big question is, why do we all love the Captain so much if his cereal keel hauls the roof of our mouths? And why the hell do they keep making it that way? Well, to answer the second question first, just look at the name, Crunch. Long story short, each and every piece of Cap'n Crunch is coated in an additive that's designed to keep it from getting soggy in milk. And sure, Cap'n Crunch is far from the only breakfast brand to use this type of coating. But the Captain's booty has a unique shape among cereals, a tiny rigid rectangle. So what, you may be asking, with a mouthful of bloody cereal? Well, there's a reason Lucky Charms have rounded edges. Once coated in the anti-sog additive, the corners of each and every piece of Cap'n Crunch act like tiny knives, repeatedly slashing themselves into your palate. That's why some of the brand's variants, which sometimes come in different shapes, aren't always as painful to eat as the original. If you're the patient type, Cap'n Crunch will eventually soften in milk, rendering them much easier on your mouth. But considering breakfast cereal is more or less designed to be wolfed down in front of the television, you're probably not going to wait that long. Now, to answer the first question, have you tried Crunch Berries? These days, Quaker makes 7 varieties of Cap'n Crunch, including the original, Crunch Berries, Peanut Butter Crunch, Cinnamon Crunch, Halloween Crunch, Christmas Crunch, and Oops All Berries. And many of these varieties are commonly found on lists of the best Cap'n Crunch flavors, which is probably why they're still in regular production. Nonetheless, in recent years, the Cap'n ship has slowly been sinking. Once upon a time, cold cereals were a standard part of breakfast for most American families, and in those days, the Cap'n was riding high. In fact, baby boomers collectively consider Cap'n Crunch to be one of their favorite cereals. But times change, and with them, breakfast preferences. Unlike their parents and grandparents, many millennials consider breakfast cereals inconvenient, preferring quicker handheld options like smoothies and breakfast bars. And the problem has only gotten worse over time. These days, CEOs at every major breakfast cereal manufacturer are scrambling to keep their products from drifting into culinary obscurity, and Cap'n Crunch is no exception. As for the Cap'n himself, his naval credentials were called into question in 2013. When a viral image drew attention to the fact that his uniform only bore the 3 stripes of a naval commander, rather than the 4 typically sported by a captain. The U.S. Navy themselves weighed in on the controversy, confirming that Cap'n Crunch appears to be wearing the rank of a U.S. Navy commander. A Navy spokesperson playfully added that, oddly, our personnel records do not show a Cap'n Crunch who currently serves or has served in the Navy. But the Cap'n himself responded on social media saying, "I captained the SS Guppy with my crew, which makes me an official Cap'n." That's technically correct, which as we all know, is the best kind of correct. The tongue-in-cheek controversy didn't hurt the success of the Cap'n Crunch Show, a 2013 series of cartoon shorts that featured the Cap'n as a late-night talk show host. Produced in conjunction with Funny or Die, the web series found the Cap'n interviewing guest stars ranging from totally ridiculous fictional celebrities to real-life Hollywood royalty like Burt Reynolds, all while sitting in a giant bowl of milk located on the deck of the Guppy. It's as weird as it sounds, but with the future of cereal somewhat in doubt, he needs to start picking up some side gigs.
Welcome back to the Cap'n Crunch Show!
Given that its motto is food with integrity, you'd think Chipotle Mexican Grill and its fast casual cuisine would have a sterling reputation. But the popular chain has struggled in recent years with disappointing sales, customer backlash, and several bona fide outbreaks. What the heck happened? Well, today we're going to take a look at everything wrong with Chipotle. Okay, time to Chipotle it on you. Intuition might suggest that a place with a name like Chipotle Mexican Grill was founded by someone with a meaningful connection to Mexico and its culinary heritage. But intuition would be extremely wrong on that count. Chipotle was founded by Steve Ells, an American businessman who was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, and educated at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and later the Culinary Institute of America. He graduated from the latter in 1990, and then went to work as a sous chef at a famous San Francisco restaurant called Stars. After 2 years of that, however, he felt ready to start his own business. He borrowed $85,000 from his father, and on July 13, 1993, he opened the first Chipotle at 1664 East Evans Avenue in Denver, right near the University of Denver campus. The original concept for Chipotle was inspired by the kind of taquerias and burrito shops that were then common in San Francisco, but basically unknown in Colorado. These places offered the speed and convenience of fast food, but with fresher and higher quality ingredients, or what we now refer to as fast casual dining. Ells settled on the name Chipotle, the Nahuatl word for a smoked and dried jalapeno chili pepper, after trying his first Chipotle burrito and being surprised at how good it was. His friends and family did not like the name and were worried that people would not know what a Chipotle is, or how to pronounce it. But as we now know, that wasn't going to be a problem. Chipotle was a massive success right off the bat. In fact, within just a month of opening, Ells was already selling 10 times as many burritos a day as he needed in order to pay back his loans. However, that kind of success was never part of Ells' plan. In fact, he considered Chipotle just a short-term solution for making enough money to buy himself a fine dining restaurant, and maybe have a backup in case that restaurant failed. According to the man himself, over the subsequent 2 years, he felt guilty every time he opened Chipotle up for business, because he wasn't following his true passion in life. But as the money started rolling in, guacamole! It eventually dawned on him that burritos were his true destiny. The menu at that original Chipotle was a lot simpler than the one they have today. There were no salads, no quesadillas, no burrito bowls, no barbacoa, and not a single vegan sofritos to be found. It was just tacos, fajitas, and burritos. Fillings included chicken, pork, and beef, as well as beans, salsa, guacamole, peppers and onions, and lime cilantro rice. Local sources were used as often as possible for those fillings, and some were even made in-house. Much as they are now, meals at the original Chipotle were made to order as the customer looked on. Those meals cost an average of $5 back in '93, which adjusted for inflation is the same as about $11 today. And customers were all over that deal. Within just 4 short years, Ells had 14 separate locations in the Denver area that were making in the neighborhood of $18 million a year. Chipotle's meteoric success encouraged Ells' father to invest $1.5 million in the business, and Ells himself was able to raise an additional $1.5 million on top of that. But growing Chipotle into the monster chain it is today was going to take a lot more than that. It was going to take the kind of money and expertise that only Ronald McDonald had. So in 1998, Ells reached out to McDonald's and pitched the fast food giant on becoming a minority investor in Chipotle. Ells showed up to his meeting at McDonald's headquarters in Illinois armed with a sample of Chipotle's grub. And the Mickey D's execs liked the food so much, they invested $50 million in Chipotle. Word is, the food was so good it nearly convinced the Hamburglar to end his crime spree. Once they were invested, the McDonald's people taught Ells and his team everything they knew about scaling the growth of a franchise restaurant and how to run a chain that large. And we're talking about McDonald's here, so they knew more about it than maybe anyone else in the universe. Chipotle was ready to go national, and they opened their first location outside of Colorado in Kansas City, Missouri in 1998. And there was no looking back from there. Powered by McDonald's support and the explosion in popularity of fast casual dining during the aughts, Chipotle spread across the nation and would have over 500 locations by 2005. McDonald's parted ways with Chipotle that same year, cashing out for $1.5 billion. That sounds like a lot, but it's been frequently pointed out that if they had held out for just another decade, their investment would have been worth 10 times that. Today, Chipotle has over 3,500 locations worldwide. Prices are relatively higher than they were back in the day, but customers aren't complaining. In fact, it's actually been good for business. How is that possible? Well, in 2013, Chipotle announced that it was going to stop using any ingredients that had been genetically modified. That made their meals more expensive, but it also made their millennial customers happy. In fact, just a year later, sales were up over 17% and net income was up more than twice that. All that buzz has to make one wonder, is Chipotle overhyped? And while that's ultimately a subjective question, there are certainly a lot of people who would say that it is. For starters, Chipotle's food isn't really as healthy as you may think. The average order has nearly 1,100 calories and 2,200 milligrams of sodium, which is almost an entire day's recommended amount. It also contains about 75% of your recommended quantity of saturated fat. And these numbers are pretty much in line with what you'd expect from competitors like Qdoba and Moe's. For what it's worth, the healthiest thing you can get at Chipotle's is actually the salad. But overall, we'd encourage you not to think of it as a health food place. And then there's the fact that if you want guacamole, it costs extra. A lot extra. In fact, adding guac to a burrito can increase the price upwards of $3, give or take, depending on where you are. In fairness, there are reasons it costs extra. For one, it's made in-house, and a given store only makes around 70 pounds worth a day. And the price of ingredients can fluctuate wildly due to economic factors ranging from availability, to weather conditions, to political turmoil. So in the interest of keeping the price of a burrito stable, they sell the guac as an extra. For similar reasons, competing franchises also charge extra for guac in some circumstances. So Chipotle isn't the only offender here. Did you ever try Chipotle's queso? Well, queso is traditionally made with processed cheeses that contain additives which make the final product more consistent. But those additives clashed with Chipotle's whole Food with Integrity brand. So when their queso was launched in 2017, Els had to tell the public, our queso may vary slightly depending on the characteristics of the aged cheddar cheese used in each batch, but using only real ingredients is what makes our food so delicious. The problem was that the queso was not at all delicious. In fact, customers hated it so much the company's stock price tanked. They eventually tweaked the recipe and their queso is still on the menu, but the whole thing left a bad taste in customers' mouths. The same could also be said of Chipotle's union-busting tactics, exposed in 2023 after the company had to pay a six-figure settlement to employees for closing down a location in Augusta, Maine that was trying to unionize. And then there's the apparently shrinking portion sizes, which customers have taken to social media to complain about in just the last year. So, overhyped? You make the call. People generally prefer that the restaurants they frequent are not repeatedly tied to the outbreaks of foodborne illness, which is why it's so weird that Chipotle is still around. They've got a surprisingly poor record in that department. In March of 2008, 22 customers were infected with hepatitis A after eating at a location in San Diego. And the very next month, 400 people were infected by norovirus after eating at a location in Kent, Ohio. Norovirus would make a return appearance in August of 2015, when over 200 people got sick after eating at a location in Simi Valley, California, and then 150 more got it the following December in Boston. And of course, there was the Salmonella outbreak that affected 17 locations in Minnesota in 2015, as well as the outbreak of Clostridium perfringens that affected over 700 people who ate at a location in Powell, Ohio in 2018. But by far, Chipotle's most regular co-pilot is E. coli. The first outbreak happened in October of 2015, when over 20 people were infected by a strain of E. coli after eating at Chipotle's in Oregon and Washington. That number would more than double as new cases appeared in Minnesota, California, New York, and Ohio. Although thankfully no one died, over 20 people did require hospitalization. That wasn't the end of Chipotle's problems, though, because in November of 2015, 5 people also contracted a totally separate strain of E. coli after eating at a Chipotle in Seattle. In 2020, the company would pay a fine of $25 million to resolve criminal charges brought by the Justice Department in connection with all these outbreaks. And while they would blame the outbreaks on employees who didn't follow hygiene procedures, they would also spend tens of millions of dollars to upgrade those procedures. So the system was at least partially to blame. New procedures notwithstanding, the damage was done. Locations closed, the stock price plummeted, and in November of 2017, the whole ordeal would finally cost Steve Els his job as CEO. He was replaced in 2018 by Brian Niccol, former head of Taco Bell, who was said to have turnaround expertise. That's business speak for guy who's gonna get us out of this mess. Whether the harm to Chipotle's reputation is permanent or not remains to be seen, but nobody has contracted E. coli from them in a while. Still, you should probably stay away from the queso.
Grilled, fried, or rare, whole, sliced, or massaged and beer-fed, Americans love a good steak. But with a red meat scare on the rise, many steakhouse regulars face grave concerns. Is chowing down on all that beef truly unhealthy? Or has steak simply been slandered for the last few decades? Well, today we're firing up the pan to find out whether or not red meat is really bad for you. All right, save the A1 until the end. Get it? For nearly 100 years, red meat steaks have been a staple of the all-American diet. From a hearty breakfast to a classy dinner on the town, pan-fried in the kitchen or tossed down on the grill. In the States, steaks are a meal as old as time. But in recent decades, the beef-based steak has become something of a scapegoat for heart disease, obesity, and any number of chronic health conundrums. Whether we're fearing for our waistline or getting a bad bill from a health specialist, red meat is often seen as the culprit for our woes. And with plenty of fancy diet plans to dissuade one from potentially carcinogenic foodstuffs, and all that hard data on saturated fats leading to problems like heart attacks and strokes, many people simply stop seeking out steaks. In fact, the popularity and overall consumption of steaks has fluctuated in the States and across the globe due to the potential problems of red meat-rich diets. But when did this tumultuous love affair start? And how does steak keep getting such a bad rap while never really going out of style? A steak, or thick cuts of meat and muscle, have been a staple of human diets since the dawn of man. When referenced, steaks often imply the red meat of beef specifically, and can be prepared over high heat in any number of ways. But steak, as we know it today, has direct origins in Scandinavia of the 1400s. Historical records show that thick cuts from the hindquarters of livestock and game were referred to as steak, stikna, and stekja. Then in 1565, Florentines experiencing the Renaissance began celebrating a particularly gruesome death of a martyr. St. Lawrence Day, held on August 10th, honors a Roman who was supposedly grilled to death. In remembrance of his charred remains, patrons cooked up enormous feasts of sliced meat on open ranges. Originally called bistecca in the native tongue, English merchants were said to have translated the dish to beefsteak, or steak for short. By the late 1600s, London saw a boom in local eateries known as chop houses, featuring warm meals for hungry workers. These restaurants served just about anything they could scrounge up. Oftentimes, that included slabs of cooked beef or proto-steaks. And eventually, the English chop house became the sort of fine dining steakhouse we see today. Across the oceans, many Asian cultures were more reluctant to accept beef as a dietary staple. In fact, it was not until a Japanese emperor began professing his love for red meat that his countrymen took up steaks as well. In fact, the famously well-tended and occasionally beer-fed Kobe and Wagyu beef cattle of Japan have only been around for a handful of generations. But over in the United States, steaks were as big as the Texas sky. Because when Spanish colonists brought cattle to the Americas, they had no idea what they had unleashed on our palates or our fat intake. And as commercial train transportation took off, the rustic cowboy ranches of the West brought their beefy wares across the entire country. After that, it was steak all the way down for most of America. From the first dining steakhouses of the 1800s to quick and cheap cheesesteaks in the Great Depression, the United States proved they had a serious hankering for red meat. After the brutal disparity of the Great Depression and the harrowing effects of World War II, American families found themselves in a new world. With suburban lifestyles on the come-up, more cash and comfortability, and a whole baby boom of mouths to feed, red meat became a staple for many families. Throughout the 1950s, steak had become part of the American middle-class identity, with references on newly popular TV programs like Leave It to Beaver, The Flintstones, and The Honeymooners. The image of dad coming home from a long day of work to a big steak dinner became ubiquitous with Americana. Mom, pops, the two kids, and a big juicy porterhouse. In some ways, steak is almost the fifth member of the nuclear family. Unless you're living with Jetsons, of course. Wait, were they literally nuclear? In part, this newfound fascination with tenderloin and tomahawks came from popular media, long seen as a food on the range. Cowboy culture could not have been more popular for pre-space age adults and kids. And as veterans of multiple wars and economic crises, many Americans were simply tired of eating scraps. With expanding markets and Americans having more cash in their pockets than ever before, families chose to splurge on food in ways previously unheard of. Throw in some heavy superfood propaganda from big beef industry heads, and you've got a recipe for an all-out steak fest. So when exactly did the red tides turn for meat medical advice? Perhaps the dawn of healthy eating in the 1970s holds some answers. Because prior to the Summer of Love, diets were less than desirable. From disgusting recipe books to downright dangerous dieting drugs, those seeking a smaller waist were often relegated to black coffee and over-the-counter remedies you typically find at a gas station. But when the 70s came around, everything got a lot more green. With organic food culture on the rise, exercise trends and fitness centers in bloom, and rapidly expanding medical knowledge about nutrition, healthy eating began to resemble what it is today. Even as steakhouses began springing up all across the states, Americans began taking their health more seriously for the first time. And with the added impact of an actual shortage, steaks simply lost their luster. In 1972, steaks were almost wiped off the meat counter entirely due to a suffering anchovy population off the coast of South America. Struggling farmers were forced to switch their fishy cattle feed for more costly options. And for every action down on the farm, there is a reaction up at the supermarket. This led to sky-high beef prices aimed at a newly health-conscious America, where before their daily steak and eggs cost a nickel and some heartburn, suddenly a trip to the steakhouse cost a fortune and came saddled with well-known side effects. By the time beef prices came back to earth, Americans were experiencing an economic boom throughout the 1980s. And although they had plenty of jazzercise tapes and medical advice to dissuade them from regularly dining on red meat, many yuppies and blue-collar diners returned to the strip. But when a beefy epidemic hit the Brits by the early 90s, filet mignons once again went out the window. Mad cow disease, officially known as bovine spongiform encephalopathy, is a fatal degenerative disease which occurs after ingesting afflicted meat. Thought to originate by feeding cattle meat and bone meal, an outbreak of the disease would go on to claim over 200 victims worldwide throughout the 1990s. And when word of the sickness spread through the media, meat eaters truly had a cow. After this low point, the beef industry suffered more blows at the hands of health organizations, as Americans began falling victim to heart-related diseases at an alarming rate. Doctors and specialist communities took note. In fact, both heart attacks and strokes were among the leading causes of death in America at the time, and they remain so to this day. By beginning health campaigns like the Million Hearts, doctors and political advocates hoped to address the red meat epidemic. Big pork and big chicken didn't stand idly by when they smelled blood in the water either. But while those industries have certainly led some questionable campaigns against their red meat competitors, major competitors like Chick-fil-A and Tyson simply used hard facts as ammunition. By repeating the healthier benefits of their products to potential customers, both white meat and the other white meat got a big push in American dining. In fact, from nuggets to rotisserie, U.S. consumers eat more poultry today than ever before. In recent years, the environmental impact of commercial cattle farming has come into question. Our appetite for steak has led to the planet being saddled with more cows than were ever meant to exist at the same time. Why is that a problem? Cattle are notorious for creating excess greenhouse gases, which they regularly expel via the, well, you know. The methane emitted from the behinds of so many cows has had a measurable effect on the atmosphere, similar to the pollution created by other industries. Add to that the harmful deforestation of large-scale cattle farms, extensive grazing, water pollution from waste runoff, and harmful feeding practices, and you may begin to wonder whether one of the tastiest meals imaginable is more risk than reward. Either way, things are looking pretty grim for our bovine friends. So, how bad is steak for you really? Well, hard facts and raw data do our favorite dish no favors. To be certain, experts agree that there is crystal clear evidence of red meat's link to heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and a shorter lifespan. In fact, the data is so pronounced, doctors have no difficulty in spelling it out to steak skeptics. Research across generations, studies from every corner of the globe, and mountains of literal heartache have made the negative impact of a heavy red meat diet impossible to ignore. Perhaps most damning of all is the evidence that non-red meat eaters simply live longer lives. Unfortunately, for every obnoxious diet guru out there is most likely going to enjoy a longer lifespan to boot. It's difficult news to hear. But it's not all doom and gloom at the steakhouse. For starters, most specialists agree that 2 to 3 weekly servings of red meat is perfectly fine. Anything more than that, and one risks taking the old ticker to the limit. But it's equally important for steak fans to keep their portions under control. While a bedrock-sized tomahawk steak might be fun for a night out, doctors suggest treating steak as more of a side and less of a main course. Also, unprocessed red meat is a protein powerhouse that does have its fair share of health benefits. Just 3 ounces of steak can make up nearly half the amount of protein a body needs per day. With nearly as much vitamin B12, necessary for creating red blood cells, a slab of steak packs one heck of a punch. Add to that a hefty source of zinc, iron, and antioxidants, and red meat starts looking pretty beneficial. While you can get the same nutrients through any number of healthier options, such as oysters, there's no getting around the fact that steak is simply too delicious to be removed from the menu entirely. The environmental impact may be improving as well. Methane production is a smelly fact of life when it comes to cattle farming, and on a worldwide scale, it only gets gassier. But with less harmful farming methods, more responsible land management, and newly developed feed additives to reduce methane-heavy rear expulsions, things are smelling a little fresher. There may be greener pastures to come. Just don't get attached to any of the cows in them. So, what do you think? Have the potential health risks changed your feelings about red meat? Or do you have your own booth at your local steakhouse? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other weird history food videos.